Board members, thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. I know we'll have a few trickling in. We are on agenda item 3, our Law and Licensing Committee report / recommendations. And when ready, we will turn time over to Chair Carey. I got you.
Okay.
Yes, we do have a quorum. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Law and licensing met this past month, and these are the action items that we have for the board. Chair, if I may just take a minute of personal privilege, I just want to address this is an informational item on 3.3, the Wallace Stegner Academy, and I just wanted to recognize Board Member Hall, who took the initiative on this. As you may recall, Wallace Stegner wants to build a charter school in, is it Sunset? In Board Member Hall's area, and they satisfied our requirements, financial and otherwise, and Rod Hall asked the chair and leadership if it would be appropriate to have this matter heard in advance of this meeting. And I just wanted to thank the chair and leadership as well as this board for granting that request and allowing that matter to be heard in advance on February 13th. And it did pass unanimously, and I thank the chair for that privilege. Item 2.4, the motion for the board is, this is the R277417, prohibiting LEAs and third-party providers from offering incentives or disbursement for enrollment or participation. This is an amendment and continuation. And the motion for the board is that the board continue and approve R277417, prohibiting LEAs and third-party providers from offering incentives or disbursement for enrollment or participation. Draft 1 on second and final reading.
Thank you, Chair Carey. The motion before the board then is that can we just scroll down just a little bit so I can reread that? That the motion before the board is that the board continue and approve R277-417, prohibiting LEAs and third-party providers from offering incentives or disbursement for enrollment or participation. Draft 1 on second and final reading. Let's go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Back to Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. This is item 3.5, R277-714, unsafe school choice option via amendment and continuation. And the motion for the board is that the board continue and approve R277-714, unsafe school choice option, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Thank you, Chair Carey. The motion before the board is that the board continue and approve R277-714, unsafe school choice option, draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to that, Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair, Member Carey, did the committee have any conversations about that these suspensions would ultimately, hopefully, make the school more safe? Was that ever dialogued about before or during committee?
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. What was discussed was there was several questions that were posed around this rule, and it appears that this rule is in place, and I would defer to staff on this, but my impression was that this particular rule is required by federal law for us to receive certain benefits and privileges as an organization, and I don't believe we have ever acted on this particular rule.
Chair Carey, would you like, if that satisfies the question, we'll end there, but if not, we do have Director Rasmussen at the table. Member Bogus, back to you. Does that satisfy your question? He doesn't need to unless he is,
I don't know that the question was answered.
Okay.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. Can you repeat your question again, just specifically?
So, Director Rasmussen, as I look at lines 17 through 22, my question would be, as this is defined, was there ever any discussion about how these suspensions inherently resulted in a safer school?
So like Chair Carey said, Board Member Bogus, this was a rule that was drafted to comply with federal law. It was drafted to be very broad, and it's never been applied to any school because it was intentionally drafted to be very broad. I don't think there was great discussion as to the question that you're talking about.
Member Bogus, follow up, or do you want to chew on that for a minute?
No, I have consternation that we haven't had a deeper discussion, because we're defining an institution as persistently dangerous. Whether we've ever done that or not, there's the possibility of doing that. And when schools are taking meaningful and well thought out actions to remove individuals who have engaged in these activities, the removal of those students would seemingly or logically make the school more safe. Yet we're defining those who remove unsafe students as, quote, a persistently dangerous school. So I guess my follow-up question, as I talk out loud, would be, is this language required by federal code, or did we make up this language?
I believe that would go back to Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is required by federal code. The other thing I'd point out is that this rule doesn't have anything to do with removing students. It basically allows parents the opportunity to have notice that they have the option to go elsewhere. And in Utah, it's kind of a unique circumstance because we already have open enrollment that even if the school isn't persistently dangerous, the parent has the opportunity to take their student elsewhere. But we have the rule basically just to comply with federal law.
Thank you, Ben. I've got comments or questions from Member Lear and Chair Carey. Oh, Member Lear, go ahead, and then over to Chair Carey.
And my recollection of our discussion, and this is not exactly to your point, Member Bogus, but Rhett, whose last name just has escaped me, Larson, thank you. Rhett did speak at during our discussion, and he did point out, and this is sort of what everybody seems to be talking around, right, that there's never been a designated persistently dangerous school in Utah. And granted, you were also talking about the hypothetical. But he was saying that because this is only a rule in place because the feds require it, but we have not experienced it, we would not have any data about school safer or not safer. My experience from a high school many years ago, and many of you are in the thick of it now, is removing one student is, and even one student at a time, is not gonna, you're not gonna immediately have data about, oh, this school is safer. It's more about giving parents choices to move their students, again, regardless of what rules, policies are available in other states, if their school is designated as that. So I recall Rhett saying, there's never been a school in Utah designated as persistently dangerous. So we have no data in Utah.
Thank you, Member Lear. Okay. Let's remind the board that the motion before the board is that the board continue and approve R277-714 Unsafe School Choice Option Draft 1 on second and final reading. And with that, we'll move to a vote. Thank you, board. That passes unanimously. Back to Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. This is item 3.6 R277-304, Teacher Preparation Programs, Incorporated Document. The motion for the board is that the board approve R277-304, incorporated by reference document, Special Education Preparation Foundational Competencies, Draft 1 on second and final reading.
Thank you, Chair Carey. The motion before the board then is that the board approve R277-304 incorporated by reference document, Special Education Preparation Foundational Competencies, Draft 1 on second and final reading. We have a question or comment from Member Earl.
Actually, I have amendment. And I think staff, do you have that? I'm not sure who's running. So, I'll wait to speak to it, but, okay, I would like to add, I probably need to read through them, right? Give me just a second to get up my document. So in section 3, which is demonstrating subject matter content and specialized curricular knowledge, I would like to add to, what does SF stand for? Well, SF 03.11, add mathematics. So it'd say knowledge of the factors that can cause reading and mathematics difficulties and effective interventions and supports for students. SF 03.12, know the essential components of numeracy and successful interventions for students struggling in mathematics. And then I'll just keep reading. Is that the best way to do that? Okay. Build a student's foundational mathematical knowledge in a systemic way by developing topics in an intentional and incremental manner. Teach clear and concise mathematical language across instructional settings and support students' use of the language. Understand when and how to use concrete and semi-concrete representations that provide meaningful opportunities to understand math concepts. Know how to correctly use, select, and apply a variety of models and representations to facilitate learning of mathematical concepts and procedures. Understand different types of word problems and instructional strategies that facilitate student problem solving and support the application of mathematical ideas. Know how to appropriately implement interventions as part of specially designed instruction that helps students build fluency and automatic retrieval of arithmetic facts. And then examples would be games, deliberate practice, timed activities. And then teach standard algorithms by using consistent language and introduced with substantial modeling and guided practice. Okay, and then SF 03.13, knowledge of components and developmental progressions in numeracy, understanding of mathematical concepts such as place value, the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, algebraic reasoning, geometry, measurement concepts, and understanding of fractions, rational numbers, proportional reasoning. And then SF 03.14, know the essential components of numeracy, including quantity and the ability to subitize, there you go, cardinality, including one-on-one correspondence, numeral writing and recognition, understanding of zero, counting strategies, number and magnitude comparison, development of number sense by building number relationships, place value concepts, part whole relationships, benchmark numbers, compose and decompose numbers, development of flexible strategies and algorithms for efficient and accurate computation, and then moving apply knowledge of Utah mathematics core standards down to 3.15. And if I have a second, I'll speak to it.
We have a second. Back to you, Member
Yeah.
Earl.
After going through the document over the weekend, observing that when it came to literacy, we did a great job of spelling out the key things that special education teachers need to know in those components. But then we only had apply knowledge of Utah mathematical core standards, and this is one area where students often struggle and need additional supports of some kind. So I put together some ideas, worked with staff. We met for a little bit and kind of went back and forth, both special education staff as well as our math staff. And this was the language that we kind of settled on together. So anyways, I just think this creates a balance to our document.
Thank you, Member Earl. The motion is before us. I am only going to reread it one time, so it's not going to be now. If we have discussion to this motion, Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair, and we all appreciate that. I would like to move to amend this, and staff has those amendments, in particular in the first section. I would like to remove the word struggling and add the language with learning gaps or areas of growth. In the second bullet point, to strike the language of the language and use the language of academic specific vocabulary. In the fourth bullet point, we change and to or, and then to strike the word meaningful. And then I just believe in the last two, they're the fourth and I believe it's the sixth bullet. I can't really see that it's in red. But my point would be is there's no great reason for that other than it just seems redundant and it's already a verbose list of things. And the idea of saying mathematical over and over again just seems weird to me. And with a second, I would be happy to speak to it.
We have a second. Back to Member Bogus.
So our special needs students are a unique population, and many of them are gifted in many areas, and they just learn differently. It doesn't mean that they're struggling. It just means that they learn differently. And so I would like to really frame that mindset at the very beginning, that they have areas of growth and places where they can learn, and they need support in their learning, but not to inherently have a deficit-based mindset at that header. I would like to have a growth-based mindset in the header. And then I believe the language, the use of academic-specific vocabulary is the intention, though it's not what was actually stated. And I reviewed that with one of the math specialists that I work with to kind of flesh out my thinking there. I think that we could say and/or, but I do believe it needs to be models or representations, not both, because we're describing a bifurcation or a set of options. So I believe or is the appropriate conjunction there. And then it's not something I would like to argue over, but I just think the language is redundant where we say to understand math concepts, to facilitate learning of math concepts. I think that's inerrant in the header and in the thing. And so with that, I would offer that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Member Lear.
Thank you. I just had a question for the maker of the larger motion. Can I ask that? If she's willing to, we need to deal with Member Bogus's first and
Yeah,
then
let's
come back to
let's
Member Earl.
address the amendment
Okay.
to amend first. Yes,
All
if
right,
that's
thank
okay.
you.
So with
I will
that,
do that.
Member Davis.
I'd like to divide out bullet 4, please.
Of this
The fourth bullet.
of this
It's
SF03.
the changing the and to or.
Okay. Okay, motion to divide out bullet 4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Back to Member Davis.
Thank you. I just feel like our students sometimes need more rather than less when they're trying to find different ways to think about learning concepts. And they might be models, they might be through, manipulatives they're working out with their hands, or they might be through different kinds of representations or written representations. And I think having the flexibility of using all of them or any of them whenever you need, and instead of just saying, well, I can only use this one, or I just think and is better in that case.
Okay, so we are going to, as we vote on this, we're going to vote on bullet 4 first, since that's the one that's being addressed here. So oh, that's right. We need to vote on the motion to divide. Thank you. So let's do that. Let's vote. Yeah. Can we do that? Is there any objection to dividing? Seeing none, it's divided. Okay. Now let's go back to bullet point 4. And is there any discussion back to Member Davis?
The maker of the amendment said that a friendly would be to put and or. And I'd be okay with that in the interest of time, if we want to just do that as friendly and move on.
Any objection to and or? Member Lear.
I think you can do that in rural writing. There has to be, it's a different construct. A
This is a document by inclusion.
Oh, that's right. So we can do whatever we want. Never mind. Thanks for the reminder.
The comment was this is a document by inclusion, not a rule. So, is there any objection to and or? Seeing no lights, that's going to be in there. So we're back to Member Bogus's amendment to amend. And I don't see any lights, so let's vote. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We are back to, I'm going to go back to Member Lear, who had a question on the original amendment. Member Lear.
Yeah, and it's kind of two parts, but not very long. First, if Member Earl is willing to respond, I just wondered, did you make this up, or did you take your additional comments from a document?
Member Earl, would you like to respond?
Well, it
No.
could be based on your experience.
I'm
so-
kidding, I do. No, some of them come from What Works Clearinghouse, others come from professional staff here that made recommendations. So I sent some recommendations based on some of the things from the What Works Clearinghouse that had the number one practice, right, the research-based. From there, sent those to staff. Then there were some additional additions added or modifications.
And just can you clarify if I
Follow up, go ahead.
what is the What Works Clearinghouse?
Federal research document, and I can send it to you if you'd like.
No. I'm
It's
just
what
wondering.
benefits struggling
Just didn't want it from the Heritage
mathematics.
Foundation. Never mind.
Well,
Never mind.
And they
That's-
may have sound research too.
Thank you. Let's
And then
go.
the second part, I just have a
Okay,
second part
go ahead.
question that's
Okay.
even shorter. I just was wondering if Dr. Voorhees was going to speak to her comfort level with this, with these changes, because they're pretty significant. So I just wanted her to confirm that, yes, this works as a special ed
I had
amendments.
Well, one, I don't know if we want to put Dr. Voorhees on the spot of saying, well, I like this or I don't
No,
like this.
not like, it
That's up
just
to
isn't-
her. But yeah, if you feel comfortable, then Dr. Voorhees, you think about how that's going to happen, and we'll go over to Member Earl.
I have one additional amendment. I had forgotten it in our engagement. The last bullet point is actually addressed, and I forgot to take it off, so I apologize. I'm glad staff recommended that. So, okay, on 3.12, the last bullet point is addressed in 3.14, development of flexible strategies and algorithms for efficient and accurate computation.
So we can remove that
Well,
without
it
objection?
would either have to vote or right, because it's before the body that's what I would make as an amendment.
Is there a
So it is-
second to that? Second. Is there any objection to removing that redundant bullet point? Seeing none, it's gone. Back to Dr. Voorhees. Well, not back to. She has lit up her light, so let's hear from her.
Leah Voorhees, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Achievement. Thank you, Chair. So we appreciate Board Member Earl reading the competencies so closely. The special education team received 29 pages of comments from the field about these competencies, and there was more math, very broken down competencies in the original document, but the field had asked to decrease the document, which is why in the original version it said that the special education teachers would know and implement the math standards. But as she said, she worked with the math team and the special ed team to add specifics so that it was parallel to the literacy information, the science of reading information that's in the standards. So that makes sense. And we agree, we all collectively agreed that this would be helpful. One thing I think it's really important for the board to remember is that these are competencies for special education teachers. This is not what the students do. This is how to prepare special education teachers and what programs, including your own program, the Apple SPED program, would be required to ensure that teachers know to be ready and competent to teach. So I think that's hopefully responds to the question.
Thank you. Yes, that answers Member Lear's question. Board members, let me put the lineup before you. We've got Member Bogus, then Member Bollinger, Member Earl, and then Vice Chair Wood. So Member Bogus.
I have no comment to this. I have a motion once this passes or fails.
Okay, thank you. On to Member Bollinger.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question I would like to direct at staff with your permission.
Please.
And I won't rehash our whole conversation that we had in law and licensing. I do appreciate these additions. I think that having the skills to understand evidence-based interventions is really important for our special educators. One of the things we talked about was the requirements for special educators in their endorsements. And again, I won't rehash all of our conversation, but I'm wondering, how will this impact the time it will take for special educators to meet these requirements? Would this add an additional 1 class, 2 classes? Is this something that you've had any feedback from universities or even just with our Apple SPED program? I'm just curious to know, because typically, especially in secondary, they have to go back and get currently a secondary math endorsement in addition to. Would this help with that issue?
Dr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair. So the amendment and then the amended amendment it just clarifies and makes more specific the expectation. The expectation has not changed in the amendment. It just makes it, it breaks it down into the specific pieces that one would, should, and can find in your practice, your standards for math in the state. So adding this amendment doesn't increase the responsibility or the amount of work that a teacher would have to do to be prepared. It just breaks it down, makes it more specific. Makes your document longer, but it doesn't increase the time or the work. Is that the...
Yes, that's exactly
okay.
what I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, I'm gearing up here. Like, Matt, do you really have to read this? These are the thoughts going through my mind. All right. Who's scrolling? I'll read it, but somebody keep up.
Somebody keep up.
Member Bogus?
Oh, I guess you have to read it for this to pass.
Yeah, let's
Go
get
ahead,
through it.
sir.
Let's do
Go
it.
right
Okay.
ahead.
So the motion before the board then is that the board amend the incorporated by reference document by adding an and mathematics after reading in SF 03.11, amend the incorporated by reference document by adding the proposed competency as SF 03.12, adding the proposed competency as SF 03.13, adding the proposed competency as SF 03.14, and renumbering the original SF 03.12 as SF 03.15. In context, SF 03.11, knowledge of the factors that can cause reading and mathematics difficulties and effective interventions and supports for students. SF 03.12, know the essential components of numeracy and successful interventions for students with learning gaps or areas of growth in mathematics. Bullet 1, build a student's foundational mathematical knowledge in a systemic way by developing topics in an intentional and incremental manner. Bullet 2, teach clear and concise mathematical language across instructional settings and support students' use of academic-specific vocabulary. Bullet 3, understand when and how to use concrete and semi-concrete representations that provide opportunities to understand. Bullet 4, know how to correctly use, select, and apply a variety of models and/or representations to facilitate learning. Bullet 5, understand different types of word problems and instructional strategies that facilitate student problem solving and support the application of mathematical ideas. Bullet 6, know how to appropriately implement interventions as part of specially designed instruction that helps students build fluency and automatic retrieval of arithmetic facts, e.g. games, deliberate practice, timed activities. SF03.13, knowledge of components and developmental progressions in numeracy, understanding of mathematical concepts such as place value, the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, algebraic reasoning, geometry, measurement concepts, and understanding of fractions, rational numbers, proportional reasoning. SF03.14, know the essential components of numeracy, including, bullet 1, quantity and the ability to subitize. Bullet 2, cardinality, including one-to-one correspondence. Bullet 3, numeral writing and recognition. Bullet 4, understanding of zero. Bullet 5, counting strategies. Bullet 6, number and magnitude comparison. Bullet 7, development of number sense by building number relationships, e.g. place value concepts, part-whole relationships, benchmark numbers. Bullet 8, compose and decompose numbers. Bullet 9, development of flexible strategies and algorithms for efficient and accurate computation. SF03.15, apply knowledge of Utah mathematics core standards. Let's vote. Thank you, Board. That passes unanimously with Member Davis and Member Hart absent. Back to Chair I'm sorry. We have over to Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. I would like to make a motion to send this to the Standards and Assessments Committee as amended, specifically for the review and revision of Standard 6.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Back to Member Bogus.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, which I know we are all excited about, after reviewing this, Standard 6 has got some grave concerns in my opinion, and instead of spending the next hour and a half debating those, my motion is to send this to the Standards and Assessment Committee so that they can do that heavy lifting there and bring it back to the board for adoption. Thank you, sir.
So the motion then is to send one of these standards, Standard 6, to Standards and Assessment. Is that accurate? The motion is to send. Hit that microphone. Let's make sure we get this right.
I appreciate your question. So the motion was to send the document in its entirety to Standards and Assessment, specifically for the review of Standard 6. Now, that doesn't mean that the committee maybe can't address other things. That's not my motion, but my motion would be to have them debate, discuss, and possibly amend Standard 6.
So, Member Wood.
Just a question. We are in law and licensing. May I ask a question to Chair Carey? You did, as a body, look through this document completely, right? And are moving it forward as is after looking at Standard 6 also?
Yeah, Chair, yes, Vice Chair Wood, that's correct. We did consider this. We specifically asked about this particular provision in law and licensing. And we asked, I believe, and Vice Chair Bollinger can correct me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but we asked what does the phraseology in Standard 6, specifically in the title section, supporting social, emotional, and behavioral growth, what does that exactly mean? And Dr. Haidt at that time responded that these are the protocols and systems in place to address the individual student IEP or disability. So I wanted some distinction that this was not a social emotional learning as sometimes we understand it. And it was it is my recollection that Dr. Height assured the Law and Licensing Committee, no, these are the protocols designed to address the particular disabilities of each student. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We do have a light from Deputy Superintendent Newey. Member Vice Chair Wood, does that answer your question? Deputy Superintendent Newey?
Thank you. Just as a point of information, if these incorporated document gets put into standards and assessment, we would need to also move the rule to standards and assessment as well. So just as a point of information.
Thank you. Member Bollinger?
That was my clarifying question. I thought they were connected, so thank you.
Chair Carey?
Just because we're on this topic, I would like to ask staff, is there any adverse consequence from delaying, by voting in support of this motion to send it back to standards and assessment? Is this, sometimes we have bandwidth to do those things, sometimes we don't. I'd like to know staff's opinion on any adverse effect of voting for this motion to send it to standards and assessments.
Thank you. I'm not sure which staff member could answer that. Dr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Interim Deputy Superintendent. So the institutes of higher education in our state and your own Apple SPED program are waiting for these competencies to ensure that their programs are compliant with your rule. The rule passed, if you remember, the rule passed several months ago. October, maybe? So when the rule passed, we told you that we would spend the time and energy needed to update the competencies to match the rule, to get feedback from the field, to go through the process that you have outlined for ensuring that the competencies meet the standards. So the field has been waiting for several months for the competencies. So it is urgent in that sense. It's not urgent in the sense that that there will likely be a bunch of due process hearings filed. I don't think it's that urgent, but the field has been waiting for these competencies.
Chair, thank you. Okay. So the motion before the board then is that we send the reference document, Special Education Preparation Foundational Competencies, Draft 1 as amended, to Standards and Assessment. Member Earl.
May I ask a question of the maker of the motion?
Please.
Are you envisioning major revisions, or are there just a couple of areas you have some questions on?
Yeah, Member Bogus.
There's about 6 different areas that I would like to see addressed, specifically in Standard 6.
Can it be, maybe I'm just talking out loud now. I'm just wondering if this is something that could be postponed till after lunch and then brought up again. Our other committees are pretty light. That's why I'm wondering if we've got the time maybe to, not to look at it as a body, but maybe a couple of individuals just, you know what I mean, collaborate in a sauntering kind of motion.
Yeah, if there's a motion to do so, speaking to this motion, I would speak against it. That, you know, I think we're in a good space. I know there's always going to be some thoughts. We could send it back and have discussion on it, but I think that the staff as well as the Law and Licensing Committee has looked through these and made recommendations, and I think we're in a good space. So I'd vote against the current motion With that, that's me speaking to this motion, but I'm open to other motions. Member Earl.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we pick this up after lunch, and which would need to include both this item and the next item. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Do we have yeah, it'd be the rule that goes along with it, Rule R277-304. Do we have a second to that motion to postpone or table till after lunch? We have a second. Back to Member Earl, if you'd like to speak to that.
No, I kind of agree. There may be just one or two, at least for me, provisions if we're thinking about where we are with our LRBI manual and such, and some of the language we've updated. I don't see major revisions on my part, but I do see that there might be a couple of places. I don't think it needs to be stalled that long, but I think with some discussion, it may be a quick thing. Maybe. If not, it can go to a committee, or it can just move forward. But that's my thoughts.
Okay. So we have a substitute motion that the board delay discussion of items 3.6 and 3.7 until after lunch. Let's go ahead and we're going to. Yeah, that's been done. Yeah. Yeah, the amendments are already done. That's already voted in. So we're going to pick up exactly where it is left off, and that is amended. Okay, go ahead and vote. That passes 14 in favor, 1 in opposition from Member Lear. With that, we will turn back over to Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. That addresses all of the outstanding matters for the board. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get you back on after lunch.